Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our practice edition for the week. I am Devin Bedoni.
And I'm Uriel Eisen.
And we've got a bit of a smorgasbord here. It looks like we both had a pretty productive week. A couple key things are going to be turning on tool life on Uriel's machine, a whip board in our shop, and you're doing some research on some interesting tool, thread milling, some other cool stuff. Looks like we both had a pretty good week.
Yeah. And a fitting quote, I think.
Yeah.
The smallest deed is better than the grandest intention, from John Burroughs.
Yes.
I have mixed feelings about the quote. There's
an assumption.
The nice part is definitely, I think we both commented on, like, things that just linger and then you finally do it and it takes so little time and it makes such a big difference and you're like, why did I wait so long?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like sometimes the why is the grand intentions, is like these big ideas about how it could be.
Yeah.
And it becomes very daunting. And then when you take a very small step that even just barely approximates it, it's so much better than nothing. Like, we hung, this is weeks ago, but we put up a board with 2 screws in it to hold like a roll of tape and some scissors because they were always floating around.
Yeah.
It looks ugly. It's not that ergonomic. Like, it definitely needs a Rev 2, but it hasn't gotten one, and it is massively better than just random stuff floating around.
Yeah.
The downside, I would say, is that it is important to have that zoomed out view to make sure that these improvements are working toward something worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that this quote, there's an assumption built in. Well, for one, it's a binary. There's an assumption of a binary built in that if you have a grandest intention, you will maybe never achieve, and that doing something small is better. In reality, obviously, we can exist between those 2 poles,
right,
and go back and forth from them. But I think it still stands that, well, I guess all of these systems that we're talking about, trying to implement these methodologies, sort of are balancing that tension between having the intention to guide and using the deeds to achieve.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and the other piece which we've touched on is that the only thing we have access to in a real way are very, very small actions, and that they just accumulate in a productive way if they are aimed properly, right? Like, typing out an SOP, the actions involved are like pressing a letter on a keyboard, one at a time in the right order. Yeah, I don't know. It's a cool one.
On that note, we had a cool thing this last week. So last episode, I mentioned that kind of took a hard stop at the beginning of the week as a reset for the whole crew. And Uriel wrote out some SOPs.
Nice.
And up to that point, I was the only one who had written any.
That's very cool.
So that was awesome to just be like, tackle this right.
Why did she do it?
Because she was the one who had time. And there were things that she engages with. Or we all engage with. But they were, I'm trying to remember actually which SOPs she wrote. But they were, things that she engages with on a daily basis that I think that we both engage with more so than quorum. I'm blanking on actually what they were for. But it was very cool to be like, oh, this is not just me now. We can share this responsibility. I feel like there's been a shift in the shop in general over the last month of sort of a low-level excitement about the fact that we're doing this stuff.
That's very cool. And I think it's worth pausing for a second here to think about what that means. So you've been doing doing lean, whatever.
So lean, bro.
Like, you've been actively taking steps in the shop and talking about it and working on it for
year
plus year and a half.
Year and a half, yeah. I think I first started reading The Toyota Way March of 22.
Okay.
And was like, mind explode kind of moment.
Yeah, I will say, for anyone who's enjoying this podcast, there's people who know a lot more about it and write much more coherently. And we do mention those books on the podcast all the time. So give them a read. They're very good.
Yeah.
But if you are trying to implement it in your shop or your organization, there is going to be some lag. And I think everyone I've seen, like shop tours, and in those books, it all talks about like the need for having someone who's sort of like an evangelist, like just someone who's like, come hell or high water, going to keep kind of plodding forward on process improvement, talking about it, noticing things, talking about what they're noticing, all that. And it's going to take
from the mountaintops.
Yeah. And I think it's going to take a while for people who are wired differently, have other things going on in their life, have a history of working in organizations that are organized different ways, to see that. I think a few important things. One is that it is actually about improving people's jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's just about you making more money and you're not going to include them in that success, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of passion.
No.
And
I agreed.
I
also, so personally, I have a hard time engaging with systems that I don't feel like I comprehend. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people are similar. There are definitely people out there who are just like, give me some rules and I will follow them.
Totally.
I'm not one of those people. I really want to know why the rules exist.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's pretty common. People want to know the underlying principles that govern whatever system they're engaging with. The reason I bring that up is I do think it's important to provide some philosophical background for your people so that they understand these underlying goals and theories and reasons for doing things to some extent, maybe not exhaustive, maybe not to the point where they're going to, be the evangelist, but at least so that it doesn't seem weird.
I think that's it. I think it can often, what I hear about people implementing these things is that from the perspective of the person working on the floor, who by Toyota's definition is the only value add person in the organization, it can feel completely arbitrary, and just that like people are just changing the goalposts on them and changing the rules and taking away their systems and their existing tools and saying, oh, do it this way, it's way better. And but I was going to ask, do you think there's anything that's changed, or has it just been time in because I know they started reading the Toyota Way. Do you think that
I think that was a turning point. I think they've both read very little. But we did have our first books and beer, as we were calling it, last month. And it was kind of cool also to see, I don't remember if I talked about this on the podcast, but sort of where their questions went. I think both of them were a little surprised to realize that like, oh, this is like a management philosophy book, not just like a how do we make stuff book. And I think that piqued both of their interest a little bit. I think both of them were anticipating like a nuts and bolts, like single piece flow manual.
And I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah, which would be awful. I mean, that's sort of what some of the Shigeo books are, but so it's not awful to those of us interested, but for a lot of people would be. So I think like realizing that it was like management philosophy and like business philosophy and just philosophy kind of in general, I think piqued their interest. And I think, one of the first questions was like, Toyota has this like concrete mission statement goal sort of. And the first question was like, do you have a concrete goal for our business? And I was like, oh,
that is not the point of this meeting.
Caught me with my pants down. But it led to a very good discussion, and we kind of like talked through some of that together. So I think that was a turning point in getting people engaged. also just a lot of discussions on the day-to-day, and the daily morning meeting, I think has helped a lot, because it's a time for us to talk through stuff and problem solve together. And in that, we're bringing in a lot of these concepts that otherwise would just be me standing at my desk thinking by myself about.
In the dark.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an aside, but
no, I think that's super cool. I mean, it's interesting to me because I don't feel like I've had that experience. Like, I hired once I was very much doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of the hiring, was for that rather than for any particular skill.
You finding someone who's interested?
Open-minded. I don't think they knew it existed. But when I mentioned the things, their eyes kind of lit up in a way that some people
like,
don't.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, all right, you're intrigued, you know. One thing to me about this stuff that I think is exciting, but I don't know if it's exciting to other people, is sort of like the pursuit of perfection.
100%.
Which is like intriguing and fun. Sometimes theoretical for sure.
Well,
but
always theoretical, right?
Always theoretical. Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to,
You'll never
what
get
was it?
there.
It's like the pursuit of perfection is impossible. Like I forget the quote. Anyway, you're never going to get there. You'll settle for excellence, basically.
Well, and it's like explicitly stated in TPS that like if you achieve your like future state, it means that it's not actually perfection because you achieved
never
it.
Get there.
So you have to then push it out again and see what the next level up is.
And in fact, Kanban is actually a tool for breaking your systems.
Right.
In a controlled manner.
Controlled demolition of business systems.
Yeah. Anyway, that's sort of all theoretical, but that's very interesting. I feel like we've gotten a few questions from people about adoption, and I don't know that either one of us is particularly qualified to speak to that. But you are going through it in a very small way, which in some ways is not applicable, but in other ways is extremely applicable, because at the end of the day, every organization is made up of individuals, and you just have a very good view of the total organization as well as the individuals in a funny way.
I think it is a little bit applicable in the sense that as much as the business was just me for a long time, and then it was just me and one other person for a bit, I had still sort of like developed a strong, I don't want to say culture, but like there was ways I did stuff that was very clear and explicit to some extent, and we are making it is like an active shift, and we're doing it together on the fly, and so I think in that sense it's like we didn't start from scratch with this methodology or philosophy. We're making a running change. So I think it is applicable in that sense.
Do you think they've started noticing that it enhances their life at work in any way? Like, do you think that that's been a shift or not so much? Like, do you think it's like more calm, more organized in a pleasant way?
I should ask that.
Like, I'd be really curious if you have, if you
I
think
have
of it.
felt that way, and I have stated as such to them. The last couple months have been like, because our work is very variable, the last couple months have been a little crazy, but given how much work we did, I think it was quite organized and calm compared to how it would have been a year ago. Yeah. But it'll still be interesting to see kind of what their experience has been.
I'd just be super curious. Like, it seems like at some point they sort of went like, oh, there's something to this, and I wonder why.
Yeah, that's a good. I'll bring it up. Yeah, I like it. On that note, and we kind of discussed this last week. Part of the crazy often is feeling like there's all the production work to do, and then all of these other tasks to do. And so this last week, we just transitioned our whiteboard to being a whipboard.
That's work in process.
Work in process. It's very simple. Makes a big difference, though. Yeah, surprisingly. So we just have a column of things to do.
Okay.
And it's just right now it's not divided in any way. It's like internal projects, little doodads to order, whatever, making an SOP for a thing, it could be like taking out the trash, but we don't put that on there. And we're writing the tasks on magnetic dry erase stickers.
I just ordered some of those. I'm very excited about them.
So good. And then we just have 3 columns, one for each person's name. And when you want to do one, you take it and you put it in your column.
And have you created an explicit limit, or is it just a very nice visual, like, you haven't finished that one, so...
We're just doing one.
Oh, one. Wow.
Because I figure you can't work on 2 at once. So...
It is the... okay, so it is definitely the ultimate.
Uh-huh.
But I also see a lot of companies have more than one. So I'd be curious how that develops. I have also seen companies that do one.
Yeah.
And I think the difference is a lot of those companies do probably a better job of breaking out what's on those stickers into something that can be achieved in one day.
Uh-huh.
Right? If it's like some major project.
That's the thing. There's some things on that they're like...
Yeah.
Implement our new tool tag system. And it's
right.
Like, that's a project.
I wonder how... Something I've been thinking about with whipboards, and I want to get that set up hopefully this week, is like, okay, so if I write a project like, redo our tool management system, which I think there needs to be a way of capturing that to-do item, but then there needs to be a step where that sort of gets looked at of like, what exactly are we solving for? What are the problems? What are the... just like a good R&D process. Mm-hmm. And then that will result in a bunch of smaller tasks.
Breaking that big task into smaller tasks.
And sort of where that happens and who owns that and how do you deal with the fact that there's like big ongoing projects that we're all dealing with in a business all the time. Mixed in are these small tasks, and I don't know how to deal with that on a whipboard. Yeah. For example... in one day, I do sales, I do production, I do paint, I do improvements. Yeah. That's already 4 categories. Do I have one item in each category? Or is it really... I mean, there is something to be said for like, you have 8 hours today. What are you doing in those 8 hours? And it might just be one thing. Yeah. And the return on invested time is so much faster if you do just complete tasks. Yeah. And so... I bet it would be better rather than this balanced, I do a little bit of sales and then I run across the room and I deal with this production issue and then I jump back into sales, get distracted, do some... Yeah. Well, going back to kind of like your brother's question of like, what did we notice? How do we problem solve? So I think the problem, like what we're noticing here and what we're trying to solve for is like paralysis from feeling like you have too many things to do. And then not being able to tackle anything because of that. And so I think fundamentally what we're trying to achieve is breaking it down to bite-sized pieces. And so I think what you're bringing up makes a lot of sense in, like, I do think it's important to potentially break out the larger projects because otherwise you might just feel paralyzed by that one. Conversely, if you pick a big project, let's say like redoing your tool organization, and you put that in your column, maybe that is a thing where it's like whenever you have time, you just chew on that until it's done, and it will get done, and you don't tackle any other small things. Right. I could see maybe a useful division just being like each person has a big project and a small project column, and you pick one of each or something. Right. You're going to end up going through the small stuff a lot quicker though. And you may never, get to the larger thing because you use up all of your sort of flex time on those small things. So I don't know. Yeah. I also wonder sometimes if maybe what we'll learn through doing it is becoming more diligent and thoughtful about pulling a tag into your column. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like right now we do a lot of projects, not a lot. I mean, I think everyone does this, but basically like, oh, we should fix that. And then we write it on a to-do list and then we do like 4 hours of work on it or like over the course of the next week, sort of figuring out if it's a good idea. And then it's sort of like, there's other good ideas also. And then that sort of gets forgotten, and maybe we'll come back to it. Maybe we won't. Maybe it was sort of a dead end, but the 4 hours that got spent on that thing, you won't get back.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to never analyze it if it's not super visible. But if it's like that tag has been in your column for the last 6 months, what's happening? It's like, yeah, it was a dead end. I think this is sort of where this is where A3 comes in, right? And I want to I'm really seeing a need for us to become more systematic about our problem solving methods, because I think there's just a huge amount of waste that feels fine. It feels like inherent in a funny way, but I don't think it is. I think it's basically a lack of or just a lot of room for improvement in the early stages of a project. I don't know. Anyway, so I think a whip board is a huge first step, and we don't have one yet. I mean, we do in software, so no one looks at it.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was so simple. I think everyone should do it, and you don't have to use the magnetic tags. You can just write stuff and dry erase it, write it in your column or whatever. But they are very cheap.
Yeah,
and very simple and utilitarian.
I was on the fence about getting color-coded ones versus white ones. I ended up getting white ones, thinking you could add color with the marker.
Yeah, or buy both.
We're
using white right now with the thought that we might end up using color because we have color at some point to prioritize. But I'm sort of like...
But then you have to rewrite on different tags. I was sort of thinking maybe of getting some magnetic colors, like just a color magnet. So then you could stick it to the other magnet. I wonder what the polarity is in those magnetic stickers. Do you think it's north facing out and south facing back, or is it sort of like a mishmash?
I think it's kind of a mishmash.
But they do sort of stack. They stick to each other, right?
Yeah, ish. Not
like
well.
Offset?
Not
or it'd be very interesting to know what the magnetic fields in those are.
I mean, you could figure that out with some
that
shavings.
Weird paper. Oh, there's also that film. Have you seen that? It's like a film. I don't know what's on the inside. Presumably something magnetic.
Yeah.
But it will show you the fields. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess I think it's good to start simple and only add divisions and complexity if it really adds a lot of value.
Yeah. That's my thought.
That's why we started with white as well. It's like, let's just leave this as a flat list and people can pick what makes sense for them.
Yeah. Interesting. I think there's so much room for, I don't know. I'm just seeing in our process, I think there's a lot of room for improving the problem solving process.
Yeah.
I think I am very good at problem solving. But that's in some ways, definitely in certain fields, but also in some way that's actually allowed me to be bad at systemizing. Yeah. Bad at applying a good process.
Yeah.
And you don't want to rely on good people, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm also I think I could get much better. Yeah. Basically.
Yeah,
anyway.
What we've sort of ended up with here, I was just realizing this morning, is we sort of have 3 boards.
Okay.
And they're loosely divided. This just happened. It wasn't intentional. But they're loosely divided into production, and that's where our job, work, whatever traveler things are.
Yeah.
Production tasks. Then we have another one that's effectively maintenance, like repeat stuff.
Okay.
So that's just like our machine clean outs and a couple other
I like that. We need that
things
board
that we do every week.
Yeah.
And then this whip board is sort of like everything else that's non-recurring, that's one-time actions. And I think
that's got a nice division.
Thinking through that division going forward, I think we can take a lot of the confusion out of what do I do right now this minute based on looking at the production board, what needs to be done. Okay, that's first. If there's nothing there that's super critical, go to the whip board, and then the production stuff happens on schedule, or the maintenance stuff happens on schedule.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So actually, seeing as this is our practice edition, let's get to some things. So this one, okay, so I've been shopping for thread mills to cut the teeth on our cams.
Yes.
Right now we're doing it with a single point thread mill, which means that every tooth gets a movement of the machine.
Yeah. So what you're seeing is a lot of cycle time.
Yes. The problem I'm seeing is a lot of cycle time and then sort of wasted motion on the part of the machine. Like just, I've been watching the machine quite a bit lately, just looking for what to improve. And I'm sort of trying to prioritize it by basically ROI. So how much time do we spend and then how much time do we save with that time? And so ideally it's things that, it's cut down a lot of time, and also how many times are we doing the process that it saves time on.
Yep.
There's a few that are on my list. One of them is right now we do a tool change to blow out the vice jaws, and you have run air to your vice jaws, which I think I need to come up with a systematic way of bringing air to the vice jaws. And that could mean a few things that I'm looking at. It could be plumbed into the vice jaws themselves. Mm-hmm. It could be to a carrier that we've sort of talked about that then gets air to the vice jaws.
Like an intermediate carrier.
That's a much bigger project. It could mean modifying the existing vice jaws for air.
I would start with that. It's so straightforward.
Oh, I meant the existing vice.
Oh.
Yeah,
well,
I'll probably start with the vice jaws that I make
start with your jaws,
and drill some holes. But the other option, which is probably the fastest, is mounting some flex line. What's it called? Lock line. Mounting it to the table that sort of blows up at an angle, and then just rotating the A axis down to it. And that's like very quick, and I could do it in the time that I'm picking a part out of the vise and delivering it to the cups.
Like a simultaneous move.
Yeah, something like that is also an option. Anyway, but one of the ones I've been looking at is that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is the thread mill. The larger diameter the thread mill is, so we found a couple that are suitable. The larger the diameter is,
and suitable for those people that understand is instead of having a single tooth that cuts a single groove, it's got multiple teeth that cut multiple grooves in a single pass. Like imagine a corn cob, effectively. Yeah. For those of you who are not familiar with milling, not a corn cob mill, but like a corn cob where each little bump is cutting a groove.
Yeah. So the larger the diameter of that tool is, the more rigid it is. Mm-hmm. We're not cutting a lot of material, so I'm not sure that's a big factor. And then the other consideration, but then as we get to a longer stick out, like reach, again, the diameter. So basically what it's looking like is we probably will need a single point thread mill to cut the lines that go across the cam, because otherwise that larger tool will hit our vice jaws.
Oh, interesting. I don't know how they're clamped, but
sort of grabbing the end of the anyway. So that's sort of, and I think the answer, my right now, my feeling is optimize each for their purpose. Like because I found ones that are small, but the issue is the number of teeth it will cut per pass just drops. Yeah. So it will now be like 2 passes on our 1-inch cam instead of 1 pass. But the tool that can do it in 1 pass will not be able to cut the grooves the other direction. So there's sort of this like, it uses up
the diameter.
Yeah. Gotcha. So it uses up another pocket in our milling machine, but it saves more time.
Or go to larger stock and protrude your part further from the vice jaw.
Yes, that is another consideration just broadly, is increasing stock size so we can grab more, so we can mill harder. Yeah. I think that would have to be a lot more. Like these tools are like 5/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch diameter. And so you need like a good 1/4 inch of clearance to the hardened insert in the jaw, and then another, 1/8 inch. So you're sort of like eating up 3/8 of an inch on a tiny part. It's kind of painful, but maybe that's, anyway. What do you think? I'm sort of feeling like just simplify, go after, like the goal here is saving cycle time, like maximize that, like get the cycle time all the way down. But then if I run out of tool pockets, which I'm not out at currently, like I could afford to add one more I could also probably free up another one or two.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to go to this effort, well, I don't understand the whole system well enough, but it seems like if you're going to go through the effort of making this like it's a marginal gain.
Yeah.
Like at least
I think it's 10 seconds per cam.
So that's not,
which is
that
out of 3 minutes. So it's not nothing.
It's not nothing, but it's still going to take a few seconds.
Yeah.
So at least make sure you can get everything you can get out of it, as long as you don't compromise too many other things.
Yeah.
The other option would be going to steel jaws and make the jaws, like you could make a very like minimal tooth to grab the stock, and then cut a relief in for that tool.
Yeah. The issue we've been running into with a minimal tooth is pull out,
not minimal in depth, but minimal in terms of like how far it comes out away from the stock and then relieve behind it.
True.
So that you could come in with a tool.
Yeah. Because
the ones you're using, the off the shelf Mighty Bite, they're 1/2 inch wide.
Right. So that's the full.
Right. And that's so that it can take a bolt and so that it can have teeth on the other side, which is all extraneous for your use case.
True. That's a thought. I have thought of a totally different way of machining these that is sort of intriguing, but this gets back to the like, how much time do we put into optimizing this product versus just going to new products? Depends when you ask. I'll give you a different answer.
So the other thing is you could get the full size one and use that to cut them in the one direction, which is most of the passes anyway.
Right.
And then just stick with your single point for the other direction.
That's sort of what I'm thinking for now as a stepping stone. Also, this part is $250. So the ROI on that is
the tool.
Yeah, the ROI is like 2 months or something of running production, or less if we go to overnight runs.
Yeah.
So pretty cheap.
Interesting. Maybe
so
that's.
I think I'm going to order a big chunky one today.
Yeah, order the big chunky one. Try it out. The other thing you need to make sure is like before you go to making new jaws and stuff is make sure that the actual part will handle the cutting pressure of that, and you're not going to have to do a bunch of depth passes.
Yeah.
And you lose a bunch of your gain.
Right. It was very interesting. The 1 inch cam, the way I'm machining it, the order of operations was almost entirely dictated by rigidity.
Yeah.
Of like dealing with which face gets machined when before removing meat.
Yeah.
I feel like normally the machining is sort of like, okay, rough out all the excess.
Right.
Go in, do your, it's like, yeah, it's sort of funny. I had to reorder everything.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Let's see. What else do we got here?
We started using our new tool tag system, which was a big step.
Very cool.
Yeah. We've been printing new tags for a month plus.
Wow. How is it?
I think it's been good.
Nice.
Yeah. I haven't had any like immediate like aha moments, but
so what's new about, well, firstly, what did you notice?
Yeah. So what we noticed was there was multiple things. Part of it would go under the quote unquote quality of life category, but genuine waste of like time and frustration. We had made the like little, I don't know what you call them, like pockets sort of that's magnetically stuck to the front of the machine that were numbered, that you slide a standard tool tag into, like an off-the-shelf tool tag. The magnets didn't stay in super well because of the polarity. They all wanted to shift, so they didn't stay in a line.
Hilarious.
And then they were made maybe a little tight sometimes for the tag, so they were a little hard to get in and out. And the real driving thing was that the tags themselves, they, from what I could see, you could only get BT30 in one color, at least from where I was ordering.
Okay.
And I wanted to color code them. And so simplifying, just the thought was get rid of the little pockets, make the tag itself magnetic, and color code it so that we can have standard and non-standard tools easily visible.
Okay.
So yeah, we printed in the magnets integral to the print.
Yep.
So there's like an operator stop midway through, where you add 2 magnets and then tell it, the printer, to go again, and it covers it up. We did green and yellow. So green is going to be for standard tools that are supposed to stay set up at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow is for things that we use often but we don't keep in a tool holder.
Okay.
So let's say like a certain size drill that maybe we use once a month, but we don't want to dedicate a holder to it.
Yeah.
And then the other reason for the magnets was so that we could magnetize, we could put little markers on the tag that say if it's in an alternate condition, like if the stick out has been adjusted.
And so that's just a physical, how does that work?
We'll just like put a magnet on the face of the tag that just sticks to one of the magnets inside, basically.
And what does that say?
That
It's just like a color, and you know that it's been modified in some way, and then you refer somewhere else to see how it's been modified, or
it's real. So the way we have our tags, the front is the ID number and a description. So because we're not going to memorize hundreds of ID numbers. So like
ID being identification, not internal diameter.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
So it'll be like number 610, and it'll be like, this is an M6 by 1 form tap on the front. On the back, it'll say specifics of the tool, what the stick out is, and if it's defined, what the holder is.
Okay.
So you can easily like just turn the tag around, and if it's the little magnets on there for non-standard or for altered, you can just stick a ruler on the tool itself and see how far it's sticking out and compare to the back of the tag.
Gotcha.
Is the thought.
Okay.
We haven't started using that aspect yet.
Gotcha.
And in doing this,
because previously there was a need to modify.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think.
Theoretically, you should not modify. There should be standard and non-standard, but in reality, in our shop,
it's like
there's an often need to modify, and coming up with a new non-standard doesn't make sense for every single time. And it's almost always that we're just needing a little extra stick out for an odd part.
And it's much easier to just reach in the machine, take the standard part, pull the tool out a little bit.
Yeah.
Keep rolling.
Yeah.
Instead of having to like go get that tool from the standard stock.
Yeah.
May trigger Kanban, which doesn't necessarily make sense because you're only going to be using it for like a minute, and you have another one.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have one floating around. Yeah.
It's just wasteful to be like, okay, we're going to pull this perfectly good tool out.
Yeah.
That in all ways except for one is exactly what we need.
Right.
And set it on a shelf, and then set up another one to do what that one will do with a slight adjustment.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think like the reason I'm sort of beating a dead horse here maybe.
No, it's worth.
Is that I think this is a super common thing where you have a system that there's a big, I don't know, in Lean and TPS, there's a big emphasis on standardization, but I think sometimes that standardization, and I don't know if that will go away with time as other things become more standardized, you realize that the cost of deviation is higher and higher, or if it is just that, because there's also a big emphasis on flexibility.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, building systems that have methods of noting when there's an exception or that is convenient and easy and understood is hugely valuable and seems quite powerful.
Yeah,
and
that's what we're going for.
Yeah, so it's very cool, and I'm trying to understand sort of what the driving
the only downside mostly of having a tool that's sticking out too far is that in certain applications you could have bad cutting performance. So
loss of rigidity.
Yeah. So, you might pull this tool out super far for this one job and program accordingly. And then you need to know that it's in a different situation, or a different state, so that when you come back and you are running a repeat program where you like slot super hard, you need to know like, oh, that's sticking out an extra 3/4 of an inch. It's going to scream. You got to push it back in. So we just started doing that. And then part of that was adding, really actually the most key aspect, I think, was adding in my tool library in CAM a designation for standard and non-standard.
Oh, interesting.
So I went through and edited the whole thing and added an S or an NS to every tool ID so that as they're put out into programs going forward, they have that designation. So you know when you first set it up, whether it goes into a yellow or a green tag.
Smart.
Coming back to the kind of like, that's the single point of truth for all tool data is the CAM library.
Yeah. Right, because otherwise you have a modification in the shop that is nowhere represented in your program.
Yeah, and we're not going to be pulling the, we're not going to be pulling that like alteration, like the little deviation from standard back into our tool. Well, we do sort of, but on a program by program basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you modify as needed, output that, they set it up for that need.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. You're not going to go back and modify it to what it ended up being exactly. It's sort of like, that worked. We'll modify it again for the next one as needed.
Yeah, basically.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure that all made sense to people, but so far it's cool. It's a much cleaner on the machine. Oh, and the last part of that was, so we got rid of the little numbered pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we just ordered stickers with numbers on them that are round, they're like an inch in diameter, and we just stuck them to the front of the machine, 1 through 21 for the number of tool pockets. And so when you take the tag off the tool and put it in that pocket, you just put the tag on the face of the machine over that number, and you can see it through the hole in the tag.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Very straightforward.
Yeah. Still a little awkward because we have like both in play a little bit on some machines.
I saw a shop tour where they did something. It's funny. I just feel like this is such an applicable thing to so many environments of like where the state of a machine is not in any way visually apparent.
Yeah.
So you have to start digging through menus or looking in the machine or whatever. I remember a shop tour where they had different cutting nozzles for a laser.
Okay.
And it was impossible to know what was in the machine. And then someone eventually came up with, these magnets that just said what was in the machine. So when you make a change, you just stick a magnet to it.
Yeah. And in thinking through doing this originally, a lot of people have made like a kind of like a rack that's much more compact that all of the tags go into. But from what I've seen, you have to pull the tags out to actually read them. And I really wanted to be able to at a glance be able to see what tools were in every pocket without having to touch anything necessarily. So that was kind of, it's less clean overall in terms of like tidiness at the machine. But in terms of getting the information quickly, it seemed advantageous. Yeah,
and I think a lot of the people I've seen who do the caddies you're talking about that are super neat, they're running more production work. Like,
right.
They produce a product. They have standard tools.
Right.
That's very in control of all that.
Yeah. You're not trying to like search around the shop for the M8 tap and figure out which machine it's
Well, so you're changing tools all the time, and every job is different, and you can't ask them to change their design a little bit to fit your custom tool, your standard tool library. Whereas internally you can. Yeah. You can be like, let's change this a little. Anyway. Very cool. I have a few very small ones. So we ordered a 5mm Allen key T-handle. We were using a normal, what are they called? Like an L-shaped Allen key for changing our vice jaws. And
they're just a little too deep for the L side, right?
They're too deep for the L side, and then also you can't spin them. Yeah. They have no inertia. I mean, they have inertia.
Very little
not enough
inertia. Yeah.
Rotational inertia. So the L handle, once it's loosened, once it's broken free, you can spin it and it spins.
The T handle.
Yeah. Sorry, the T handle. Yeah. And so that was the modification. So it's just a little bit faster, ergonomically more comfortable to do. Like, it doesn't hurt your fingers, so that's nice. Yeah. It's something Sam was just like, can we order a T handle for this? Because I had gotten one for changing the gripper fingers. And it's kind of nice because it's a really long one, and so you basically go to torque, and the way you know is just when it starts to
twist,
like in a springy way, not in I just bent my tool. So he's just like, he asked for one for that, which made a lot of sense.
It's kind of amazing how much sometimes those very little things are just like, They make a big difference.
We use it all the time, and it costs us $13.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's very nice. Great quality of life improvement. It is, and also it is easier to use. It's faster to do the change. I've been thinking about using a driver, like a drill.
Yeah.
I'm worried about like cross-threading. I don't know. It just feels like
we've done that a
tool.
lot for like stuff where parts are bolted to a fixture.
And you're not fully unscrewing a screw, right? Oh, no, you are.
Fully unscrewing.
Okay.
And what we found is that usually you need to start by hand. And then,
right.
But it still is often faster to swap back and start it by hand, start all of them by hand, come back and drive them all to torque with a driver. We actually just ordered new drill driver combo set. The ones we've been using, I've had since 2013.
Okay. 10 years.
Yeah.
Good life.
They're beat.
Yeah, I bet.
They still function mostly, but it was kind of like...
because now that I'm thinking about it, we use a torque wrench afterwards. So we already have a tool switch in there where you start with the T-handle and finish with the torque wrench. It might make sense to set up a driver where you change to a driver and then we just leave it set to that torque.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of... that. We've also done it from a torque managing torque perspective.
So start with the T-handle, move to a driver, and the T-handle would just be for the first thread.
Yeah,
basically.
Effectively. We've been running into a similar frustrating issue where we have 4 different vices that we use currently.
Okay.
Manual vices.
Yeah.
And they all have a different hex driver size.
That's a pain. Can you just buy new ones from McMaster?
New hex driver size?
New screws. Oh, no. That's the built-in.
The built-in screw for tightening the vise. And so I keep finding myself walking around looking for the right socket.
That's super frustrating.
It is. I'm very close to buying a bunch of more Shunk manual vices and just saying this is the only thing we use because they are better. And, and just wanting to standardize and get away from this because it's aggravating.
And because who likes money? You know,
and that
give it to Shunk.
But then we're coming to these situations where we'll have to have 2 different torque wrenches at a station,
that's super frustrating.
One with each socket because we're doing op 1 in one vise and op 2 in a different style of vise, and it's this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
But we don't have enough vices right now to not do that, so we're having.
Would an adapter work, or that would add a protruding thing that is, could you just fix to the smallest one, attach a little adapter?
I don't understand.
To make it the same size.
on the screw on the vise.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They're all very close too. It's 1/2 inch, 12 millimeter. And then one of them is I think it's a 9/16 spline.
Brutal.
And then the 3/4 on the big 6-inch vices.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we made an improvement programming. I mentioned in the last episode that we're trying to run overnight. The easiest way to do that, we had a tray that runs for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Doubled it up. So now it's going to run for 4 hours.
Doubled it up. You just added another tray.
Well, so the funniest part about it, we had
the
before
other tray.
In the machine already. Before we had the flip station, we had trays that would hold half op 1 and half op 2.
Yeah.
And so once we added the flip station, we've just stopped using the op 2 side. But it's there. And so Sam was like, can you just machine the pockets right into that one? I was like, yeah, once I get more plastic. He was like, no, couldn't you just machine that? The op 2 pockets are smaller than the op 1 pockets. So I literally just ran the same toolpath back there, created the tray. I haven't run it yet because I updated all the macros, the programs that run the gripper to do the logic to go to the second tray. And I tested it by taking out all the program, the load to vice program, run op 1, flip station, op 2, all that stuff, because otherwise I have to sit there for 4 hours. So I just took that out and made it do a little Z move over each pocket. And it cycled through everything correctly, finished the program. Everything seemed to work well, but until it runs,
You
it
still gotta
hasn't
find
run.
4 hours to stand there and make sure.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll stand there,
Yeah.
but I'll
Come back
I'll
every 5 minutes.
be in the shop. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to run it into the night for the first time
Mm-hmm.
with new logic.
That's
It feels like
smart.
very sound logic. Like I ran through it. It was kind of interesting. After making the first modification, I basically at the end of the program pushed a new XY coordinate for the beginning of the second tray. So it marches through the first tray, and then once it's finished with that, there's some logic to bump it to a new set of variables. It bumps it over there, and then it marches down the second one and finishes. My partner's dad is a mathematician who does a lot of programming.
Yeah.
So I guess I called him and asked if he could have a look at my G code, and he walked in and he's like, "Why are you using Go 2?" He's like, "That is like the first thing modern languages got rid of." It's like, I think it's standard. So I went and read up on like G code logic.
Yeah.
It's pretty limited.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's totally sufficient.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's like we're not trying to do really the complicated things are all done in CAM or inside the control.
Sort of. Yeah. I think there's a lot of room for, and you took a stab at sort of making these more universal programs that you just modify.
Yeah.
Instead of like going through all the programs and changing little bits here and there. It's sort of like right at the top, you just change some numbers and it can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Your programs are pretty substantially limited to the exact methods you're using right now for machining, as are mine.
Yeah.
Extremely limited.
Yeah.
And theoretically, we could break it out into modules that would allow for a lot more flexibility without reprogramming.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it's worth it because the program is 57 lines. Like a lot of programmers are working on programs that are like 10,000 lines.
Yeah.
And so like going through that and changing everything, like in some ways, the really basic hacky version, like the less logic is built in, the easier it is to sort of proof. Because you're like, it can't get stuck in some weird loop that I can't foresee here.
Yeah.
It's just like marching through like hard coded coordinates and stuff.
Yeah.
Hard to go wrong. So I don't know. I feel I have mixed feelings about it.
I do sort of feel like if it was a real issue, people would have fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there was a lot of benefit, and there probably are people, in industry, in high production environments doing very complicated macro B programming.
It seems like the answer is to not use G code, is to do a lot of that logic off of the, like outside of the control, and then telling the control what to run. Seems like a lot of what's happening. Like if you think about managing a warehouse, those like pallet pools that are like a huge line of racking.
Yeah.
And the robot can go anywhere and get any.
Yeah.
That's not managed in G code, probably.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
well, no, I think you're right, and I think the benefit there is really that the consequences are very high for bad G code. The consequences and the safeties are very simple for managing a pallet pool system.
Sort of. I mean, you have to run the right G code on the right palette, but
yeah, but it's an easy compare to be like, does this match? And if things go wrong in that, it's easy to test for sensors if a pallet's out of place or that kind of thing.
I think you're right that there hasn't been enough of a need to bother revamping G code, basically.
Also, so much inertia in that system.
100%.
So,
right.
I mean, some like whatever Heidenhain doesn't run G code as we know it, so they have revamped it in a sense.
That's true.
People love it. I think you can do a lot of different things with it. So maybe there is a need, and some parts of industry are revamping it. Yeah,
I also think there's a lot of wasted time that people don't realize that is driven by sort of hard-coded programs, basically, right? Like not a high reliance on macros, both in the control, but also like, I don't know, warm-up routines that are sort of hardware specific, and people just rewrite the routine for the spindle speed you have and the XY travels you have, right? Instead of just like writing programs to begin with. I mean, it sort of blew my mind when, I don't know, people share programs with me that are like industry standard, and you're like, this is so hacky. It's kind of unbelievable. I mean, they're very simple, but I do wonder if it's sort of hiding some waste.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy to just go through and modify that I think that's what everyone does.
Yeah. I think it's another example of like short-term gains versus long-term gains.
Yeah.
And everybody's always crunched in the short term.
Right.
And so they do the simplest, quickest,
easiest to debug option.
Yeah. Easiest to get running.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you...
I'm guilty of that for sure.
Yeah, we all are, because it's a reality we all exist in. And it's very hard to justify, I think, putting in that extra time unless there's a clear benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Small thing, got a text from one of the employees over the weekend, like, hey, this sheet pan rack is for sale on Craigslist on Bainbridge. You want it? And I was like, sure. Yeah, it seems like we'll use that. So he went and picked it up. And we have had this ongoing issue where we're cutting material at the saw and we don't have a good place to put the material. So we end up doing like lots of walking back and forth. And it's like the longest, most awkward walk in the shop. It's a small shop, but it's still a long, awkward walk comparatively. Or we'll end up like balancing a tray awkwardly on the like cover for the coolant chip sump. And it's like, someday this whole tray is going to fall down in there and it's going to be a disaster and everything's going to get mangled by the auger.
Oh God.
So yeah, we put the sheet pan rack out there in this spot that had more or less been dead space. And now you can bring a tray out with you when you start cutting. And as stuff comes off, you can just put it on the tray. And then when it's all done, you carry it in.
Nice.
It's great. We've also like depending on the length of the cut, some parts can stack up on the outfeed on the saw, but it's not very long.
Yeah.
And we have a bucket there with coolant to catch overflow, but it just kind of like sucks. You're reaching into this nasty like coolant. I mean, it's not nasty, but it's a bucket of coolant.
Yeah.
To get parts out. So I think most of us, when we're sawing, we tend to try and visit the saw often to set parts aside so they don't end up in the bucket.
Yeah.
Also, we have a couple times forgotten or not noticed that parts ended up in the bucket.
Cut more
on the machine. No, not run more on the machine. Not cut more. Run what we had on the machine, assumed that it was done.
Interesting.
Because we'd used everything we cut.
Right.
And then realized like we didn't actually make as many parts as we needed, and 2 of the blanks were still in the bucket, kind of a thing. That's actually, I think, has only happened once. But
when I used your saw briefly, and I had that issue, would it make sense to add like a slotted? They sell like grating, like some sort of grating off feed table so the coolant could stay in the saw. I've
had a lot of thoughts for how to handle this. It just hasn't been a
top
priority.
Of the list. Yep.
Yeah. It's a little complicated in that you would need it to be able to fold out of the way.
Gotcha.
For when you're setting up a cut.
I wonder if it would save, probably would save a lot of time if you got a little induction switch and put it part way so there was still some buffer to the edge of the current off feed table, and then just run a red light into the shop so you could see when parts had gotten there, so you didn't have to walk all the way out to check on the saw.
Yeah.
Or what about just adding a video camera and a screen?
Just a little webcam?
Like from, top view, so you could just glance up and see how it was doing. I wonder how much time that would save in walking back and forth.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was
so basically thing. In terms of asking why, you guys noticed that you were walking back and forth, we're
still going to have to walk back and forth,
but a little less,
and then just the awkwardness of where do we put this material has been taken away. And so you're not walking back and forth with the tray every time. And, if you do pull stuff out of the bucket, it's got a place to drain on the tray.
Interesting.
And you could be cutting multiple jobs before you carry them out if you want or something. And mostly it's just like keeping things organized.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about what it is like theoretically. You're adding a buffer there, like to accept work from an upstream process.
Yeah.
And the advantage of having it there is basically to reduce transportation, like how many times you have to walk back and forth. I mean, it definitely reduces defects in dropping stock.
Mostly what it reduces is the chance of a full tray of material ending up in the sump.
That feels big. That's big.
Yeah, that's the main thing. One other thing I just remembered is we haven't fully set it up yet, but we ordered timers for our tumblers. And I think Ariel did it, so I haven't actually seen how it's fully set up, but I think it's going to be a timer that will power a power strip.
Okay.
The power strip will power tumbler, recirc pump, and we got some fun like themed Christmas lights that we're going to run along the top top of the shop. So like each tumbler will have a different.
That's awesome.
I think she got like palm trees and
I love it.
Coconuts and stuff. So they'll be down the middle of the shop, and when the lights go out, you'll know that it's done.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty
without
simple.
Walking across. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we changed our spring injector at our assembly station, like the thing that inserts a spring into the buckle before the pin gets put in.
And then was this the thing that you increased the magazine size?
Yep.
Same thing?
Same thing. Every time a spring runs through it, it wears away at the plastic a little bit. It's all 3D printed. We may add metal inserts to that one wear area, but basically it needs to get changed out intermittently. It was creating a defect where the spring leg getting released because it had gone like fully through the side of the thing was scraping the buckle in assembling it. And so we caught that. We didn't have one on hand 3D printed, which we mean to. And so it sort of brought up a question of Kanban again. We keep running into this of like production tools that are not Kanban and have a particular lifespan, and we're sort of bumping up. Our production has increased sufficiently where these are like, it used to feel sort of like, oh, well, that happened today. Okay, we'll deal with it. Like no big deal. Now it's sort of like we planned on being running and we're not running and we can't run. So some stuff to think about, just like process reliability, how that all gets triggered, that we haven't figured out yet.
Yeah.
We did change it.
Interesting. Cool. Last small one. We sent our first quote with Paperless Parts quoting software.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cool. They are great to work with. Pretty much, at least in this early phase, got someone on hand like to answer questions and make alterations, like
that's great,
more or less at a moment's notice. So it's kind of like, sent this quote, customer had a question about an addition, like they wanted to split quantities between different colored anodizing. And I was like, okay, how do I do this? And then someone was right back with me. It was like, okay, you could follow this pathway, like you could do it this other direction. We're going to add a line so you can add this detail. So I'm feeling very good about this choice and what it's going to do for us going forward.
That's cool. I forget if we've talked about this, but I think there's so much improvement to be made in software.
Yeah.
And this like freemium mindset, I don't know. It's not great. I think I try to find free tools to try, but sometimes and by sometimes I mean always, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And like looking at people, there's been a few studies on 4-day work weeks.
Yeah.
Basically, the common theme is every company that's trying to move to that spends like 3 to 6 months preparing for it. And from what I can tell, a lot of the preparation has to do with like IT. Of like, this person's whole job was basically, or half of their job was copying numbers from this system into this other system. And it's like, all right, let's pay someone a good chunk of money to just fix this for good, where they talk to each other and like all that stuff. And
interesting.
Anyway.
Cool. Yeah. And just to give some background, the issue there was just too much time going to quoting, and also not having good information necessarily going in and out in terms of getting a sense of what we were making money on, what we weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of a two-pronged goal of reducing our admin, sending quotes that are more representative of what the things need to cost, and getting back to our getting back to our customers faster. And I think it's going to do all those things pretty well.
That's cool.
Yeah. Feeling good about it.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like we both have a couple others, but we've run over, so maybe we should just call it a day.
We'll call it a day. Maybe chat about them next week.
Sounds good. Thanks all for tuning in and listening. Love the feedback. Please keep sending feedback. Really appreciate everyone sort of weighing in and what's interesting, what's less interesting, ways we can improve the podcast. Also, like, things you have been thinking about and would like to hear about is really interesting. Yeah. You can find the podcast at Incremental CI on Instagram. Please send us messages, tag us in your improvements. You can find me at austere_manufacturing.
You can find me at Lycan_MFG on Instagram.
Have a great week.
Yeah.